My name is Scarth, and I'm the Chief Executive at Juniper Education. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all to this webinar in what promises to be quite an exciting conversation between us. We're going to have a really interesting session where we're going to talk about the new partnership between Sisra Analytics, part of Juniper Education, and Pupil Progress. And actually, more specifically, the experiences of a multi-academy trust who've been using both systems and the impact that it has had on those systems. So the session is going to last about 45 minutes or so. We will talk to begin with for the first half an hour or so, leaving 15 minutes for questions. So as we go through the discussion and the chat with the other delegates and attendees, please put any questions into the chat itself at the top of the Teams link here. I'll keep an eye on them as we're working our way through, and as we get to the end, I'll then ask them from there. I can see there's one question already, Mark, which is a good housekeeping one. Yes, we're going to record it, and then we're going to send things back out as transcripts, and there's various other bits of follow-up at the end, which I will summarise. So, without further ado, I'm going to let our two guest speakers joining me introduce themselves, and then I'm going to provide a short introduction to Juniper, and we'll get right into the weeds and the middle of it all. So let's get on to it. So first of all, I'm delighted to introduce to you Anna Hayes, who is Assistant Principal for Achievement at Orchard Mead School. Anna, if you could just give a brief history and background to yourself and introduction, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name's Anna Hayes. As Chris said, I'm part of the Mead Educational Trust. I'm Assistant Principal, leading on raising achievement at Orchard Mead Academy, but I've recently moved to Orchard. I've been at Mead Academy, which is one of our other 6 secondaries, which was a new school, and I was there for 5 years. So I'm going to be talking about my work at Mead around Sisra and pupil progress, but then also a different perspective of launching it at Orchard Mead, which is a school that has been around for a lot longer. So I've kind of got both perspectives. So hopefully that's really useful, and looking forward to hearing your questions at the end.
Fantastic, thanks Anna. And we also have Brett Griffin on the call as well, who's going to be supporting the conversation, and Brett is the founder at Pupil Progress. So Brett, over to you to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, good afternoon everyone. Super excited. I founded the company with the passion in supporting teachers and getting first class data into teachers' hands, school leaders' hands, most importantly into students' hands. So really couldn't be more excited about this conversation and hearing from Anna about how it works and how it does exactly that, which is put that first class data in all the key stakeholders' hands. So really looking forward to the chat.
Fantastic, thanks both. So I've already introduced myself, but I'm going to give a very quick background to Juniper Education itself as well. Many of you will know Juniper Education primarily through Sisra Analytics, but Juniper actually is the merging together of 14 different educational organisations. That merging of those 14 organisations over the last 5 to 6 years is really the coming together of a single mission, and that mission really is to address a problem within the market as we see it. And that market is very simple, that in education technology, schools and maths have been left with a compromised choice, essentially. So that is either to try to buy one system that attempts to do it all. It's an all-in-one, jack of all trades, master system, and that leaves compromises around functionality, particularly in specialism around educational elements like Sisra Analytics, like tracking in pupil progress and those elements. The alternative a school and math has is piecing together the educational specialist systems that do provide a depth, do provide a solution to a single pain point in a school or mat, but they remain or have remained isolated, and therefore schools and mats are constantly having to balance between these two things. What it means is you have to create compromise, where you end up paying twice for functionality and piecing together all these different stories. And Juniper Education and our new platform Join Up is the bringing together of all of that. The partnership we're going to talk to you today, which leads with integration between Pupil Progress and Sisra Analytics, is a really great example where we are bringing the best-in-class solutions together. They are no longer isolated, and you'll begin to get systematic impact and change across your mat, across a number of areas. This is a great case study for us and a great opportunity for us to really push this forward with a real world example. So, Anna, I think over to you, perhaps. What I would like to hear from you to begin with is what the scenario or what the situation was, where the challenges were within the schools that you've worked in prior, I suppose, to bringing pupil progress in to support Sisra, and just some of the experiences that you had.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I started in TMET at Mead Academy. So as I mentioned, that's a new school. Well, not so new anymore, but that opened in 2019, and I joined there in the second year. So it was a new school. We had middle leaders of all sorts of different experiences, some that had never been middle leaders, some that had, and found that everyone was approaching data differently by the time we got to year 10 and year 11. And that's the same with where I am at Orchard now as well. Very different context. That's a school that joined the trust around 8 years ago. We used to be called Hamilton College. Again, I found that middle leaders all had different approaches to how they were tracking their data, whether they were using QLA, whether they were having a sort of bell curve for those, not generalizing, but mathematicians. And I found that there was a real discrepancy between what each middle leader was doing. So that was a real challenge, especially for Castlemead when we came to our Key Stage 4, looking at those predictions, looking at those conversations post our first set of results. I found that they weren't as powerful as they could be. And same with when I came into Orchard, I wanted to make sure that those conversations post results, post marks were really purposeful, and that students had data that they could understand and see where their gaps were. So the main issues that we were experiencing was everyone using a different system, some using QLA, some not using QLA. That then affects feedback lessons, that then affects what the students are getting back from their mocks. And I just felt that middle leaders couldn't necessarily go into depth about their actions off the back of mocks, and couldn't necessarily do class comparisons. So that was kind of two different schools, but kind of similar challenges to face when looking at data.
When I've spoken to data managers over the course of the years, a big piece of the success of Sisra and the use of its really powerful analytical tools is the source data in the first place. Getting that right actually is a really critical piece of the story. And what you've just described across different departments feels to me in my conversations like a common challenge, I guess. And Brett, you and I have talked about this before in the past. This is something that you see a lot, I think, and is part of the reason pupil progress came to be.
Yeah, I mean, what Anna's really articulating well, and we'll use the word system and different systems. I'll be quite direct. It's the use of spreadsheets, and it's a massive problem in all education across the education sector, but particularly in the UK, where the only real tool that exists currently is a spreadsheet that enables you to try and calculate a grade against the exam board requirements. Two major problems with that. Are you actually capable of using Excel in a really efficient way? Do you have the time to learn how to use Excel? The other is what no one really wants to consider as well is just how more complex exam board qualifications have become over the last 15 years. Unit weightings, scaling factors, application of grade boundaries that change every year. So that's exactly what Anna's talking about, which is everyone's got a different nuanced system because of all of the ways in which you can possibly attack the problem. And what Pupil Progress was set up to do is give a school complete consistency, simplify that problem, and allow everyone to actually create a parity across the school and then the trust, so that we get what we know Sisra is so powerful at doing, top level deep analytics for whole schools and then for trusts, but you've got more confidence in the data now. So it's the two complement each other so well because of how deep rooted the problem has been for the last 10 years.
I always find it remarkable, your point about using spreadsheets across, so in such a kind of core piece. I still find it remarkable that is the norm actually. And I suppose back to the kind of Juniper point about trying to get the best in class solutions together and working synergistically together. Anna, it sounds like you were using both the combination of spreadsheets, but also your MIS wasn't necessarily really playing a part in all of that. And MIS, in theory, to me, claims at least to cover quite a lot of this kind of assessment area and data area, but again, perhaps hasn't fit the purpose for you, and that's why you needed these two products together.
Yeah, and I think just to build on what kind of you're both saying, so for example, teachers would put their predicted grades onto Bromcom is what we use. How can a middle leader then sense check that data and see what it's actually based on? And how can teachers look at their class and see the grades and understand, well, what they need to then do with that data just from Bromcom? And also from a student point of view, from Bromcom, we then pull those reports that every school does, and a year 11 student, for example, gets a list of grades of what they're predicted to get. What does the student then know to do with that? Do they know, well, I'm predicted a 4, but I'm really close to a 5, or I'm predicted a 4 and this is what I need to do? And that's what Pupil Progress has provided for us, that other layer of that Bromcom couldn't give, in the sense of middle leaders just see a list of grades. How on earth are they sense checking their predictions? And I've got a little bit more, I'll delve into that a little bit later, about how we've worked on accurate predictions using both Sisra and Pupil Progress.
Fantastic. Okay, that sounds really interesting. So I think it's kind of really clear the challenge that you had in front of you and the problem. I guess that the next thing is then what was it that prompted you to make the shift to bring Pupil Progress in alongside Sisra? Because I think you've been using Sisra already. What was the thing that kind of made you get over the line with it? And then the other thing I'm really interested in is in first reactions really from the departments and from the users as they got going.
Yeah, so we decided to introduce Pupil Progress. It was off the back of one of my colleagues when it was all the CAGs and tags back in the COVID days, and she recommended it. I think her school had used it and she had joined Castlemead, and I was really, really interested by it to make our conversations more powerful and just having a consistent approach to how we track data. So as you mentioned, we did use Sisra. I don't think we were using it well enough. And I think now having the two together, we're using Sisra a lot better alongside Pupil Progress. But we decided to initially launch it just with Key Stage 4. Pupil Progress has Key Stage 3 as well. But I think the importance of launching it with Key Stage 4 first was we all work in schools. We know what it's like bringing something new in, and especially where schools have seen lots of different change. It's hard to implement a new system. So we wanted to keep the rollout manageable. We wanted to make sure that staff saw the absolute benefits of Pupil Progress. They've spent time building these systems. We're saying, for us to then say, oh, their spreadsheet aren't as efficient as this, it can be quite hard to manage that. So we, in both Castlemead and Orchardmead, have launched it at Key Stage 4 initially. In terms of how staff took that, I think the rollout is really, really important. So at Orchardmead, I think is probably a school that is similar to most people here, coming in with getting them to reflect on the current system that they use and the disadvantages of the system that they have, and then showing them what Pupil Progress can offer really helps with the launch of it. And also, obviously, working at Castlemead, I could show the impact from that, but it's taking it step by step. There is so much that Sisra and Pupil Progress can do together. At Orchardmead, we've just started with getting an assessment on at Key Stage 4. We've started with the initial stage to then build up, and I think that's really important with the launch, because we've got to manage how that rollout is, and we want the buy-in. And as soon as they see all the amazing things you can get from it, they absolutely will be bought in, but you've got to do that in a timely way, would be my advice.
I mean, I've worked supporting schools from the supply side now for 22 years, all of my career. And I would say the single biggest challenge in a school is the capacity for change management at scale. It's really difficult just because of so much that you've got on, and making people progress or the combination of them a strategic choice, I think, is an important piece because it pushes things through. Brett, from your perspective, this is presumably a similar story to you here in other MATs, and in terms of kind of quick wins or hearts and minds, I suppose, for pupil progress, have you got any kind of top tips that you can think of that would support in here?
Yeah, I mean, like you, Chris, we've learned the hard way. When we were so excited about what we do, when we first started, we would be super passionate about rolling it out as fast as you can because we really believe in what we're doing. And then we've learned over time, no one knows your context in a school better than you do. So we're here to actually listen, and I know Sisra, having spoken to the Sisra team, are the same. It's, you know, your staff, you know how this is best going to roll out, and let's support that. Is it best to start with 5 subject areas, grow that over a 6 to 7 month period, and then start to bring in some additional subjects, and then it becomes something that is more of a cultural acceptance. Some schools need a bit of hard, fast change, and they can get the staff on board because they can come in, and we've had some schools buy it within 2 weeks because they said, look, we've got to make some changes, but I want you to come with me. And they've had those internal conversations. So I think for me, it is trust your intuition on you knowing your staff, knowing the time of the year, knowing their capacity. And if you trust your gut on that and you get a support from if you get pushback from that from an EdTech company, it's not the right way to roll it out, because they should be listening to what you know, which is your staff and their capacity, is what I would say. And it's exactly why it's been so successful with Anna, because not just saying this because you're on the call, Anna, but because you've got those leadership skills that allow you to understand the empathy with staff, what work they've got, what challenges they face on a day-to-day basis. It's been very successful because you've trusted your intuition on where staff are.
Can I just add, because we have recently, all the other schools in our trust have recently signed up to Pupil Progress, but every school is doing it differently. So Orchard Mead, we are doing it in every subject and have really managed that launch. But then another school in our trust are just trialing it with subjects that they feel are ready to try that. And I think having, so we had a colleague at Castlemead who'd used it, having an advocate who is at that level, who is a middle leader, who understands what middle leaders are facing day to day, it really helps with the launch. So I absolutely agree. It does depend on your context. And I think the fact that we've got 6 schools in our trust now doing it, but everyone's doing it at a different pace that's right for their school.
Great, fantastic. So moving on perhaps to how the two systems work symbiotically together, and the kind of sum is greater than the parts kind of conversation, I suppose, in here, and probably particularly referencing your experience in the schools where it's been a bit more developed than all the rest of it. I'm really just interested to hear your thought on why the two systems work so well together, and also actually specifically about the matchmaker meetings that you've referenced through the past as well, because I think that's just a really good sort of specific example that's got some real value to share with the room.
Yeah, I feel like I can talk for hours about this, so please do cut me off if I just keep talking. So yeah, we use Sisra for the main headlines, kind of giving us that overall picture. So every middle leader would look at the percentages for their 4+, 5+, 7+. Obviously, we don't have Progress 8 at the moment, but the kind of key headlines, we get that overall picture from Sisra, as well as looking at kind of where their key priority is. So from Sisra, they're looking at their percentages. They might compare to last year, compare to national, and they're saying, right, 4+ is where my priority is after data drop 1. So the question then is, why is our 4+ behind national? That's when Pupil Progress then comes in. So using the two systems together, our middle leaders would then go on to Pupil Progress, filter across the year for those that are potentially on a 3, and then look at, is there any gaps that are trends across those groups of students? Is it that they've struggled on question 5 on the language paper, What can we then do to support these? And that's the same for teachers as well at their level. So Sisra is telling me that my class average is coming out, my class residual, sorry, is coming out as negative. If I look on pupil progress at those students that are 1 grade off their target grade, what are their gaps? Who are those key students that I need to know about? Can I bring certain topics into the do now task where I can see their gaps are, or set a particular homework for the students to do to get those gaps to improve my 4+. So it all kind of filters down. And then in terms of matchmakers, so matchmaker, I've just kind of made that up. We call it matchmakers. It's essentially around getting the match in your basics. So how do we get our 4+ basics, 5+ and 7+ to be matched? So I call them matchmakers because I meet with the head of English and the head of maths to improve our basics measure. So we meet half-termly. We've actually done it last Thursday, so this is really timely for me to talk about. So we had our meeting following Data Drop 1, and we used both of the platforms to have a really powerful and purposeful conversation. So we looked at our key headlines from Sisra for basics. We then pulled the data in terms of who are our match students, so who's a grade 4 in maths but not in English, and vice versa. We then created our key groups using that data. So we've got loads of different groups, but for example, we've got our match for 4 in maths, we've got a secure 7 in English, we've got a push for 5 in maths. The next step to that, because it's all well and good having these groups, is actually identifying what they need to do in order to get the match. So the push for 4, for example, what is it that they're sitting on a 3? What is it that they need to do that? So we then use, and I appreciate you might not have pupil progress, but they've got a tag feature on pupil progress, and that's where we turn those groups into what we call tags. And Brett, you'll probably be able to explain this better than me, but I will give it a go. But essentially we've created those groups into tags, so it doesn't matter what classes they're in, they're then got a little tag next to their name. So we're going to be running intervention groups with these groups. Doesn't matter that they're not their teacher, that person, that member of staff will go on to pupil progress. They will filter for that tag, so the push for 5 or push for 4. They can then see with this group of students that they don't know what are their curriculum gaps. Despite them all being in different classes, they can see the trends and even just see at a student level what it is that they might need to focus on. We've then called them level up interventions that will then feed into that. So I would want the middle leaders, and this is where it's really important because it's at all levels. Middle leaders are looking at the gaps, what can they do? But then the teachers or the member of staff running the interventions, what are the gaps? And we've then got a program running for 6 weeks that is really focused on the gaps as opposed to just what we think they might need to do to push for a 4 or a 5.
And I think that is such a powerful story. When Brett and I first kind of started the conversations about this partnership, one of the things that I was really struck by, I suppose, was, Sisra tells you the output and gives you the most detailed analysis around that you can need. But actually, unless you can bring that back down into teaching and learning and down into the subjects and down into what you actually need to do and where the gaps are, that you've only got part of the story doing it that way. And Brett, when we first spoke, this was very much for some of your motivation when you were a teacher originally and coming up with the idea for this, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, really interestingly, I used to have quite heated debates with my vice principal about what Sisra was telling him and what Sisra wasn't telling me as the head of department. And this is why I was so passionate about working with Sisra, because I knew what it was telling him and what he needed, those key groups, the students that are getting English, not maths, the wider picture across the school. But what I needed was then go the so what. So when we talk to schools, we say, okay, I'll ask myself the question on the call, which is, so what, Brett? This is wonderful, but what do we now do? And that's this is where this has become so powerful across the school and trust that now use Pupil Progress and Sisra, is because you get strategic oversight, but then you get, right, what actions do we now take? And the key is as well, which makes it even better, is you go back round because it's, is it working? Right. And then we can then monitor and truly see if it's working or not, and then revisit the things that we need to tweak or refine. So it's beautiful. And I don't know if we're going to have time at some point to talk about it, but what's also so powerful is getting that information into the students' hands is so critical, because we've forgotten in education how the change comes from them. The numbers only improve in Sisra and pupil progress if the students are on board. So now they've got a tool that gets the data in the students' hands that then helps to see what is and isn't working, and it just creates that wonderful loop that allows us to know the actions that are having an impact.
Yeah, again, I think that's a really powerful piece. It's making sure we're bringing all the stakeholders, the most important stakeholder when you think about students, actually into the whole process. I mean, I think when I think about the link between these two things, I often think of pupil progress having impact from the middle leadership down into the classroom and down to the students, and Sisra from the middle leadership up into the C-suite, up into the boardroom. And it's a really good way of picking it up. There's at the risk of jumping around my order of things a little bit around questions. There's a question from the floor, which is from Nigel Shepherd, where he says, how accurate are your predictions following the use of pupil progress compared to when it was just Sisra? And I think that's what we're now talking about, the kind of student right the way up to the top. You can see how this would have an impact in here. And I guess, Anna, I'm interested from your perspective around the accuracy of those predictions and what impact the two systems together has had over, one or just spreadsheets or whatever you've used in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think predictions are such an interesting conversation, aren't they? Because it also is so down to the student. Like it's up to them in the end of the day. But it is important when we're thinking about interventions to make sure we are intervening with the right children. So I found teacher predictions. Firstly, it's around our middle leaders sense checking what they are putting in. Are they sense checking what their team are doing, and do their team feel that they know how to predict? So one of my favorite things about pupil progress is at the end of your tracker, it tells you the marks off from the next grade. So you can do, for those people that love data like me, you can look at your trends in your school as to from October mocks to the real exam, on average, how many marks do our students make? I found that really powerful to then link that to pupil progress. So, for example, teachers can make really informed decisions on their prediction because they're looking. Child X is currently on a grade 6, but they're 12 marks off the next grade. Do I think from now until the summer that is achievable? If yes, I'm going to predict it. So teachers can have really informed predictions. But then also from a middle leader perspective, which I've spoken about in terms of that sense checking. So I've just sat with the middle leader of maths and we went down all of the predictions on pupil progress. So we put our predictions on pupil progress. And there were some things that came up. So a child has been predicted by their teacher a grade 4, but they're 40 marks off. They're currently on a 3 and they're 40 marks off. That meant the middle leader could go to that teacher, and it's not about saying wrong, change that to a 3, but it's about having those conversations. Oh, I've noticed like they're 40 marks off. Do you really think, like, is that achievable? What kind of evidence do you have? And actually the teacher then went, oh, do you know what? I do really like them and I really want them to get a 4. But actually, if we're then putting a group on to try and push to a 4, we need to know that they're on a 3. So that's really helped in terms of our predictions. So at Castlemead, obviously I've only just joined at Orchard Mead, so I'm hoping to have similar data to back it. But we saw our predictions from go around 13% of over predicting on average across 4+, 5+, and 7+. And through the use of pupil progress, we got to within 3% accuracy from our final data entry to results. So that was the 2025 results that we've just had across the board. We were roughly around 3% over predicted, with our 5+ only being 1% over predicted on average across all subjects.
Wow,
fantastic. That's a pretty hard stat to hit us with at the end there about how effective it's been. It's really powerful. I guess, Brett, there's a sort of similar question to you really about the importance of the two pieces of data in your view as an ex practitioner, and how they would have fit together in your world, and perhaps from the schools and Mats that you've seen already that are using both, or you've talked to about both, as you know, both systems well, a kind of top tip to getting the system in from a data and an accuracy and a consistency perspective? I know that was obviously one of the problems we talked about with the old spreadsheets, and I guess it's just your own reflections around that from what you've seen in various schools and Mats over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that organically comes to mind, and the fastest thing that comes to mind is keeping things simple. And the system itself is complex enough. Varying grade boundaries, unit weightings. What we really encourage schools to do is not try to overthink the obvious. And this is why, and again, apologies, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the call, it's why it's been so successful in this context, is because the school have really just not overcomplicated it. That's the structure for the exam board. That's the weightings for each particular paper and unit. We've sat exams or past papers, and we've used previous grade boundaries to guide us. To be clear, using historic grade boundaries is not your silver bullet in deciding what a student's going to get, but it does give you very real guidance on where a student is or around or likely to, achieve. Really great example, a student that's 8 marks away from the grade 5 that they need. Great. Well, we know really that we need to secure 12 marks then, don't we? Because then we've got much more of a likely chance at that student. So we're not going to shoot for the 7 and hope it's okay. We're going to go for the 12. So the schools and the trusts that have been most successful with our platform and in combination with Sisra are the ones that have really kept it simple, not tried to overcomplicate it, and use the tools that are at the disposal. Let's use last year's grade boundaries. Let's use the current weightings that are already in play. And what that does, most importantly, is it allows you to make a non-emotional decision. And the reason why the predictions were so accurate is because we're now encouraging staff to make a subjective decision. The student's wonderful. They're really good. I love them as a student. They work hard, but the results are the results. So as much as I really want to them and believe they can get that 5 or 6, the reality is telling me, based on last year's grade boundaries, against the exam board structure, we're only going to get a 3, and this is what we need to do to get them there. And it takes away that subjectivity and that, will and belief and hope, gives us the truth and allows us to take action. And that's where the simplicity is where are we and what actions do we need to take? Let's take those actions and the outcomes will improve. So, yeah, I mean, forgive me, I don't know if that's any advice, but that's my share from all the schools. I think it's now we're roughly working with nearly 750 schools, and the ones that just simplify it to see the wood for the trees, they're the ones that have seen the biggest impact.
Fantastic, thanks, Brett. And so, Anna, before we move to the floor, I can see there's a few questions that have come in. Perhaps the sort of kind of final word through the main conversation with you now, and that is, for schools that are considering using Sisra and Pupil Progress, they perhaps have one or the other at the moment. What's the sort of single big thing you would want them to know when they're thinking about it?
Yeah, so I think with Sisra, it's a brilliant tool to identify students for key measures, keep track of how your school is achieving on a whole cohort level, like you said, that kind of top level and the middle leader level. But then Pupil Progress adds a powerful level for these students to identify why they're underachieving, what their curriculum gaps are, where they're currently tracking and how far off they are. And then something I've not managed to have time to talk about, but is the powerful conversations with middle leaders on a whole cohort class level around curriculum gaps. So whenever I meet with a middle leader, one of our questions now is, what is Pupil Progress showing you? And our conversations have gone from, oh, well, we're at this percent post mocks at 4+, to we're this percent and Pupil Progress is showing me this, and this is what I need to do to tackle it. So it's so action informed. And sorry, just one other thing that I do want to make sure I say, because I haven't had a chance to talk about, is the students. We use them at parents' evening. So I've not launched it at Orchard Mead yet, but those conversations with parents are so much more powerful now, because we're not just saying, oh, your student's on a 4, they need to do their homework, this is what they need to revise. we've actually now got a student report that says your child is on a 4, they are 10 marks off a 5. If they do this topic, this topic, this topic, they can get to that. And I believe they can do that. And the students and the parents, because I think we've not spoken about parents, that students and parents know what they need to do to get to the next grade. Sorry, I feel like I've taken over the time, but I hope that kind of clarifies the two.
I think that's a absolutely great answer. As someone who's worked in education and as the parent of a secondary school aged child, the quality of curriculum conversations and teaching and learning conversations is something that I would love sitting with something with my parent hat on rather than on the side. That high quality conversation about learning is just so important, isn't it? It's a bit the same in any organisation, I think, not just education. The quality of the conversation that you can base it on, based around that system, is critical.
Yeah.
And I think that was really helpful and really good. We've got a bit of time left for questions, and there's a few of them that have come through. So I'm going to just pick some of these out. I'm going to answer a couple of them myself quite quickly, and then some of them are going to come across to you guys. So there's a couple of questions here around subscription and pricing and demonstrations of pupil progress. As we come to the end of this webinar, we're going to send out a survey. There'll be some contact details on there as well. Those kind of questions there, which are based and individual to your school, and we want to talk to you and understand your context in order to be able to give you a quote and all that sort of stuff, is something we'll follow up with afterwards. So when we send out the information, please do respond to that survey and fill it in, and we'll make sure we come back to you on it. I also want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about how we upload Sisra to the data from pupil progress into Sisra. And Brett, this is one perhaps that we'll do a little bit between us, but the partnership so far between the two organisations is in step 1 of a kind of 3-step planned partnership. The first step has been to match the data export from pupil progress into a format that is immediately imported into Sisra. So you don't have to do any data manipulation, mess around with stuff in spreadsheets or anything else. You literally click a button in pupil progress, create a file, and import it straight into Sisra. That is step 1. Step 2 is going to be pupil progress integrated into the Join Up platform that I talked about at the beginning, and that's going to mean that you share logins and share information, and there are some data shared between things. The third step, and this is the really exciting one, comes as more and more schools work together with us in this forum. We create a big set of data, a big data set from which we're able to start to look at information. And at that point, we are going to be working as two organisations, but also with a lot of the schools and MATs who are working with us to understand what bits of Sisra data you would like to populate in pupil progress. So you've got a dashboard that shows you the right subset of information here. And equally, what set of information from pupil progress might show in a Sisra dashboard or in other places. So actually, you're going to start to be able to see the corollaries of data, all of those different places surfaced in the right place in both systems. So you've always got access to that information. And I'm particularly excited around this, and Brett, I'll give you a chance to chat about it in just a second, because I think this is something that hasn't been seen in this market and in this space at all before, this complete link through, and I think could be really exciting. And yeah, Brett, perhaps if you want to just comment on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I need to repeat. You've absolutely nailed where the partnership is heading, and I echo the excitement. I think an overarching just commentary is schools have actively asked Sisra, can we get more depth in QLA? And schools have actively asked pupil progress, can we get more top level analytics? And you know, when Chris came and found me, and I was excited because he was someone I wanted to speak to as well. My interest is not trying to replicate what already exists, and actually we should be modeling more companies working together. Even pupil progress is run by softwares that integrate so quickly, that make my life so much easier, and it makes it better for both of those companies too. Our biggest passion, and we've spoken about this at depth, especially I know the Juniper team, and in particular Chris as CEO, is how do we make teachers' lives easier? How do we make it more enjoyable for them to do what they love doing? And most importantly, how do we get that impact in the students' performance? So rather than trying to compete with each other, let's work together and make it better all round for everyone that's trying to do what we know is the most important thing, which is driving student performance.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brett. So into a couple of the sort of slightly more technical questions, and these are definitely not ones for me. Anna, I'll open up to you, but Brett, maybe you as well. So some questions around QLA specifically in here. So it says, we've used QLA platforms in the past that then direct students to specific resources and videos. Does Pupil Progress do something similar? And then the other question is about how complicated it is for subject leaders to set up in the first place around the QLA piece. So, and if I start with you and Brett, you can chip in as you see fit as we go through.
Yeah, so in terms of the setup, that is a barrier that you have to show how easy it is to do. So Pupil Progress has all of the past exam papers already on there set up as a QLA. And also they take requests if there's one on there that they don't have. So if you're doing June 2024, you can just upload the QLA. So there's nothing you need to do there. It's all linked to the topic summary. You might be sat there thinking, oh, well, I've done June 2024, but I've adapted it. That's fine. You can adapt a current QLA paper that is already on there as well. So let's say you're doing it with year 10, but they've not done question 10, 20 and 23, you can edit the QLA and remove those questions. And the new, I think it's new this year, really great, is that you can combine two assessments. So let's say you've done half of June 2025 and half of June 2024, you can actually combine the two assessments as well. So in terms of the QLA, it really is so easy because they've got everything up there on the platform. Also, if you're maybe not doing a past paper, you can do a customized assessment where you can choose to just do a raw mark or do the QLA. I always encourage middle leaders to do a QLA because of the data it gives you. And it's so easy to even do a customized assessment where you're setting it up from scratch. The platform is so easy to work with that it is easy to build that in. Brett, do you want to pick up the other bit about, I hope if I've done that justice, or add to that, but then the bit about how it links, because I know we're not quite there yet in terms of how it links to like Sparks Maths, but I know there's some work going on with that.
Yeah, so one thing I will kind of cover is everything is pre-set up. So there's 4,500 trackers that the Pupil Progress team have built that are in line with every exam board qualification and subject area that is available. So we've even built recently the AAQ qualifications for level 3. And that means also we've pre-linked every key topic to every AO and or topic area across every qualification and exam board. We've got pretty much every previously published past paper at question level analysis, full QLA for science and maths added to the system. And is exactly right. If there's a paper missing, as long as you give us a bit of lead time, you send it to our team, we add it because, there's going to be a benefit to another school. But in terms of linked resources, we're trying to collaborate with some key players who are key learning resources for schools, such as Sparks and other providers. We do have a tool that allows you to send out the resources as a linked resource via our application too. So you can, those groups of students you've identified, you can personalize the learning by sending that linked resource to that student via our application. So it's very flexible, but at the same time, all of the heavy lifting has been done for you. And that's why a lot of schools have come to start using us, because adding a paper, marking every topic area against every question takes time. And obviously there's more papers that have been released. So, and the last point is, well, we also update every single previously published grade boundary set. So that's done within 2 weeks of the actual published grade boundaries coming out in the summer. And we do that across every single tracker. So it's that part of it, that onerous task that you have to maintain all year round, that's all done.
Fantastic. So I'm going to try and squeeze one more quick question in. It's one from Owen that you answered right at the start. So apologies for not doing it to begin with. So And says, we're new to Pupil Progress, and Anna, this is probably one for you. What's your advice on the first data collection of the year 10 cohort? Not talking mock data collection, because we're only term 1 in, it's teacher assessment perspective, and how do you ensure the validity of the assessment using Pupil Progress at this stage, and how do you report it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because the platform is amazing as long as your assessments are amazing, because what you put in is what you're going to get out. So I would advise that school to do a QA of your assessments first. A good way to do that is actually by uploading your data to Pupil Progress, because if you're doing a customized assessment and you see the average grade is coming out at an 8, that's telling you that that assessment is too easy. I was trying to get my head around that. And the other way, it could be the average grade's coming out as a 1, it's too hard. So I think just starting with year 10, you need to do some quality assurance of your assessment first if you're not going to do a mock exam. But it's also, even if you're just doing some sort of end of topic, it's a great way to just, the more data you feed in, the more the better the data that's going to come out. Brett, any other advice that you would give?
Yeah, really early year 10, my advice, Anna's spot on there, which is getting some data on there is going to tell you the validity of your assessments. Exactly that. As soon as you start seeing 9s and 8s, especially from 2025 mark papers, there's alarm bells there. Is how challenging is that you know, that set of questions. I always advise chunky mocks. Really just get some questions that have come from previously passed papers. Build those mocks that are 40 marks if your final paper's out of 80. It doesn't matter if you have multiple questions that are different questions covering the same topics, because you're testing them against the way that the questions are structured in the exams. So I'm always an advocate of taking previously published questions, even if you're using a duplicate of a question from the same topic areas, because you want to get those students in front of how the language of the exams is going to be structured as soon as possible.
Fantastic. Very conscious of time, very conscious that we have overrun already. So probably just up for me to thank everyone and round up. First of all, Anna, I really appreciate your time talking and sharing your experiences of the two systems together. There's over 200 people on this call at its busiest moment, and I think that just shows you just how challenging this area is in schools, and just how much a solution like this is needed, and just how many people are interested in it. So for you to share your experiences, I think is really appreciated, and I think people have got a lot of value from it. In terms of follow up then to the rest of the room, we are going to follow this up with a technical webinar where we're going to do a demonstration of Pupil Progress alongside Sisra in a bit more detail. The dates and the sign-up details for that will follow in an email which we will send to you, which also has a survey on it. If you've got any questions, I really appreciate your time filling that survey in. You'll be able to join the webinar through all of this. And if you have any specific questions at all, you can see the email there on the screen now. That anyone who's interested in understanding a quote or understanding it specifically for their school, any school that is interested in this, we would always do an individual discussion and a review with you. And if that is always best and almost required, both the data manager responsible for Sisra, but also the head of academic achievement or progress, whoever is responsible for that classroom piece as well. We can get 2 of you in a room, have a really good discussion about strategically how this fits. We were delighted to do so. And so it really is just left now for me to thank everybody. Please don't forget to fill the survey in. I thought that was a really great hour of time, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.